here we are back. Just a Mike Mitchell episode today. That's all we need for this one here. Coming in hot. Do a little intro here, and then we'll get into Mike. Mid-season here, UFL review. Kind of what do we think about all that stuff? Couple news and notes. Like and subscribe if you appreciate all this stuff. We're giving away 2 free tickets to the St. Louis championship game in St. Louis for the UFL. When we hit that, I think we're like 50 subscribers away, Mike. I think we can do that. But like and subscribe, give a thumbs up. CFL coverage will come next week. I know the draft happened in Vegas, working 15, 16-hour days here Sunday through last night. So we will get to that. But today is, Mike and the UFL and all that, but we will get to that. I promise, get some player interviews and all of that. I think we might have a Brock Heward sighting next week if everything works out. So like and subscribe if that entices you. Mike, here we are, UFL, halfway through. I can't believe it. The theme this week, UFL, alive or just breathing? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, technically it is alive, right? I would say the thing of it all is I think we're all like a lot of people out there expecting the worst, like doom and gloom, like thinking like maybe 2024, this doesn't work. And maybe these two sides break apart or this is the death of spring pro football. But I think from the beginning, I've been saying to everybody, that will listen or that pays attention, that this bought them 2 years. So I think 2024 is a bridge to 2025. We're definitely getting 2025. I know that this might not age well if all of a sudden we find out that there's like some kind of well, you never know. That's why we expect doom, right? But every indication is that, this is at least, they're not going to say this publicly, but it's at least a 2-year thing. Then we'll see from there. So the whole idea of the merger was these two sides coming together and, trying to find some light at the end of the tunnel, from survival mode to thrive mode. So that's kind of like the story there. But it's interesting. Quick side note, cool that a former USFL and XFL player was picked first in the CFL draft. I thought that was kind of a unique thing. That was washed over. They didn't really mention that much, of course. But and it's cool to see like a lot of these UFL players that have found we'll see what happens. Training camp starting up in CFL. UFL players that have found homes on CFL teams. There's some really good guys out there. Jeff Badette with the Argos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, they got a shot with the ratio. You never know. But there's a lot of UFL guys that were just recently on teams that have headed up north. So CFL is an awesome league, and we're coming towards that. So it's a busy period right now between the CFL draft, the NFL draft, the UFL, all that. Fun times, but busy times for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you're tracking any of the stuff, Anthony Miller, I know, did a bunch of write-ups as well for Sports Illustrated as well. So if you're tracking, I was trying to keep track of all that stuff, and Farhan was on and everything else with the CFL draft. Speaking of, and then I know the UFL sent out this week, the Nick Novak specialist, happening in the offseason for 2025. I said, there you go, confirmation, 2025 season, and they're not quite, but ratings this week a little down. If I feel like we've hit a watermark. Expectations for you in terms of coming from the league, and then we'll talk attendance as well. But TV, I feel like we found kind of our low water marker. It really doesn't seem like anything's fallen out.
And I thought early on they were kind of exceeding expectations considering the heavy competition they had. A lot of people were like, oh my goodness, March Madness, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, we hit a little bit of a mid-season lull this past week. The numbers weren't that great. They weren't awful by any stretch of the imagination. I think the key is, I think the big thing I've written about it like a million times at SI is I think we know what the floor is with these leagues. They have, time, it's contingent upon time slots, who they're going up against, whether they're in prime time or not, whether or not they're on a big network, over the air, linear television. Those are kind of and we kind of know what the floor is, We're waiting to see if this league can hit 1 million viewers. We'll see this coming weekend. There's 4 games scheduled, all on big network television, 3, I believe, on Fox. No more split games in prime time. So which confused the heck out of everybody. I understand that they always do those regional broadcasts. MLB does it, NHL, et cetera, et cetera. So anyhow, I think, be interesting to see if they can actually, because we know what the floor is, if they can actually build upon this when they get towards the playoff push, when they get to the championship game. I think everybody now expects championship game rolls around, the league's going to do over 1 million viewers, maybe 1.5, 1.4, 1.6, maybe, who knows. It'd be nice to see a higher ceiling develop. You get what you put in. So in terms of promotion, marketing, the attention that's on these leagues, in our bubble, these leagues mean everything. But in the sports world, they're still in that same kind of ignore mode. So, you kind of notice it in the periphery, but it's not something that's really on the sports a mainstream landscape. People like forget sometimes the UFL's on.
We had Rick on last week, Rick Saratella, talking about, like, is it more USFL in charge? Is it more Redbird in charge? Marketing to me feels more USFL. We're kind of bare minimum. I think social media has been really good this year. And I know we talked about that last year with the XFL, and like, it'd be halfway through a game and you wouldn't even have any, plays, upload, like that's all good. But what is your read on the situation and just your thoughts on that? Because I don't see this perforating out into the atmosphere unless you're like watching NASCAR or whatever on Fox, like seeing any of this stuff.
Yeah, Fox and Redbird had like shared interest and almost like shared values. Like I know people read into the XFL losing like 50, $60 million, whatever the official number is. But when you look at the Redbird XFL model, a lot of what they do is to save money. The whole Arlington setup, the travel, not paying taxes in Texas, 3 teams there. All of that is to save money. And we know about Fox. They've been in the money saving business with the USFL for a while now. So a lot of what they do is by default because it's bare bones. Now, there is some expenses that they're going to be cutting down upon in the future. We saw a little bit of that in the offseason with seasonal employees rather than full-time. Their head coaches, in order to coach in the league in 2024, had to agree upon becoming seasonal employees, and reduction in pay is crazy. But it's the reason why Wade Phillips is in San Antonio right now, as Hines Ward refused to sign a reduction in his pay. He's landed on his feet, whatever. He's found another coaching job in the coaching ranks. But Wade Phillips would not be coaching his league. The Brahmas would probably not be this good if they didn't have Wade Phillips and AJ Smith and all that. And Mark Lillybridge has done a tremendous job with that roster. So I think this marriage, these are 2 like-minded partners. Disney's is a part of this too. We don't know their breakdown, but it's been reported. Sports Business Journal, Ben Fisher, that Disney is definitely part owners in this whole thing. You get what you put in. So hopefully at some point they'll be able to sit back and reassess and decide they're going to have to spend a little bit of money in order to grow this brand. It's not enough for them to just exist and expect growth. You're going to have to start planting some seeds, and that's going to involve some money.
Yeah, it's just all of these, everyone seems adverse to taking any sort of like wide swing or risk here. And I just don't, we saw that with the USFL and like, well, we're going to go into some of the hubs. Like I never believed in year 3, we're going to have 8 USFL teams in the, 8 cities that way. Like, it just feels like we're always kind of we're on the edge here. And it never really feels like anybody wants to kind of jump into the pool full feet. And I just don't know. I don't see what changes in that. I guess, like what needs to happen for them to be like, okay, now we got it. We're going to invest another $100 million.
I don't know if people remember this, but I reported this. It seems like 20 years ago, but it's not. The XFL in 2023 was going to do a full-on hub in Arlington with all their teams playing there, and just to save money. And then they decided against that. And I remember when I reported that, they were thinking about a full-on, that means the St. Louis playing in Arlington, everybody. And I remember when I reported that they were thinking about that, but they're shifting away. They're going to play in their stadiums. Danny Garcia, who's not on X anymore, I guess it's called, liked my tweet, which further validation of, what I was reporting was accurate, So it's crazy. Like during this whole process, right? I think people forget, like, there was a chance this merger wasn't going to happen. And I don't know the full details on this, but when Fox and Redbird submitted their paperwork, which I reported first back when I was with News Hub, the government asked for revisions and update on info. So it took a while. The expectation was that this was going to be approved by the government, but it actually took a while. And in the meantime, before they actually submitted the paperwork, they discussed so many different scenarios. That's why we got so many reports out there from people about multiple hubs. They legitimately talked about 12 teams. I was just talking to somebody this morning about this. They legitimately talked about 10 teams. They talked about Canton, Ohio as a possibility for the league. They went through everything until eventually the final paperwork was submitted. Once the final paperwork was submitted, they even debated up until the 11th hour whether or not to have the gamblers or the roughnecks.
Well,
And
I think they gambled poorly.
yeah, and when I reported the 8 cities, everybody jumped the gun and automatically assumed gamblers, and then they put it on as their own work, right? And as it turned out, they stuck with the roughnecks thing. Now we can argue whether or not that worked out or not. I'm sure we'll get into that momentarily. But I tend to want to. I love the football aspect. I love these players, but you got to understand with these leagues. And I know there are a lot of people that are upset at me that I put out the attendance figures within the league. They don't like that the focus is so much on those numbers. It's not fun to look at sometimes when you only see 6,000 fans, but a big part of these leagues is big markers for them is how they're doing in attendance, how they're doing in ratings. Nobody pays. I mean, you pay attention to NFL attendance, NHL, NBA, some cases MLB. If a team's going really south, the whole thing with the Athletics right now, everything's pretty crazy, with Oakland losing another team and all that wackiness. So, but with these leagues, attendance and ratings are important, and it's a barometer, it's a marker as they build up. People have to also understand, like, you have to step outside the bubble. And, you put yourself in a family man's shoes in terms of spending money, and put yourself in a sports fan's shoes. And, as the weather gets better out there, it's nice out there today, at least on my neck of the woods. It looks like it's nice where you are. People have options and things to do. I'm not trying to make excuses for these leagues, but it is difficult if I don't know how you want to list it, but the UFL is like what? 7th, 8th? 9th in the area. I don't know, however you want to rank that. It's NHL, NBA, NFL, etc. And then UFL, it's like a lacrosse league, pickleball. It's kind of, I'm sorry, it's everybody out there. I love football to death. I'm paying attention to UFL more than the NBA playoffs. I mean, go Knicks, who are probably going to choke in the playoffs. But I'm honestly, like, I'm here. I'm an advocate for this. I make no bones about it. I'm not a fanboy for any of these teams in the league. I have loyalty towards a certain team since I was a child. I got it on if you can see that faded Jets logo there. But when it comes to these leagues, I root for the league as a whole. So I'm actually sitting here. You and I are recording on a Thursday. I'm sitting here hoping that NBA games wrap up and that there's no big time NBA games on Saturday and Sunday, just so the UFL has a chance to do a better rating on the weekend. So I make no bones about it. I'm rooting for these leagues to succeed because I think they're great for the football landscape. It means a lot of jobs, a lot of working people in football. And, as someone who's been an advocate of these leagues forever, my love through the NFL draft, college football led me into my love for the original USFL, the CFL, because I've monitored and followed these players. I understand how such a small percentage of players make the National Football League, and I think there's value in having these kinds of leagues. It's fun to me. And also the odds are so much against them that I actually root for the underdog. So this is like the ultimate underdog. Like, the likelihood is that these leagues are not going to make it because all of them have died a miserable death. And so attendance and ratings, it's not fun to look at. I know. And for anybody who's a supporter of the league, they don't like to see Birmingham with only 7,000 fans. They don't like to see whomever with 6,000, whatever, Houston, Memphis, I don't know. But hey, those are the numbers. Those are the reality. I got to report it. I can't fanboy it up. So, I mean, that's kind of the story there. So we'll see, like, in terms of like these leagues building popularity, I think the leagues themselves are quality. I think but Redbird and Fox and Disney, they need to reassess, and they're not going to go all in, but they need to see where they're weak and build some strength in those areas. They need to you get what you put in, so they need to make more of an effort if they want to see growth. They're not going to get it by default.
Expectations for the league in terms of attendance. Well, I guess the first off, so because you talk about that and not wanting, people, you get like the Emery Hunts of the world, and I respect Emery tremendously. Like,
Sure.
Who watches football to see fans? I'm like, well, but if the goal is to sell these leagues off in 5 years or 10 years or at some point in the history of mankind, like, you're going to need to have more than 6,000 people. That's why I care about attendance. Is that you said you view it as kind of a barometer as well, but ultimately that is the goal, right? It's not, we don't care about, it's not the money we're making at the gate. You got to have someone there that's interested in bringing these teams to market, right?
Right. And as far as the attendance thing, and I get where Emery's coming from with that, right? Because I'll watch football anywhere, any place, anytime. So for me, I get it. For the diehards, that's, but here's the thing though, and forget about the optics of it for the people who are casual fans that turn on a game and see nobody there. And the thing is, if you're watching a wrestling show, if you're watching a sporting event, and there's no fans in attendance, there's no natural game atmosphere and energy, home team, road team, it takes away from the perspective of the game. It decreases the value of it. You watch the St. Louis DC game. This past weekend was probably the worst collection of games in the UFL. It wasn't that the play was awful. It was just, kind of lopsided. Birmingham beat the crap out of Houston. St. Louis, that game, the St. Louis DC game, that atmosphere was fun. It got away from DC in the second half. It was 17-12. They got back in it. And then obviously Battlehawks steamrolled them. They got a big measure of revenge from last year. But that game felt like a great Sunday afternoon pro football game. The big plays, it was kind of fun, back and forth. The crowd was into it. It enhances it when you watch it. When you watch a college football game and the crowd is going crazy, if you're watching like a Georgia-Alabama game and there's like a few hundred people in attendance and people are just walking around and nobody's a fan of the teams and they don't care, it decreases the interest of the game. It's just the way it is. So it's important from a business aspect. It's very important for these leagues. They need to figure out a way to create revenue streams. Now, I was on your big show when you were in Arlington before the season opener for Renegade Stallions, and I told you I shared conversations that I had that day with someone who had very modest expectations for the attendance. We went over numbers. I can't really, like for some of these markets, the expectation was lower than the others. So like for like Memphis, the Michigan situation, because of late ticket sales, they weren't sitting there going, I hope we get 20K. I mean, everybody wants to get 20K, but last year, because I'm aware of how poorly the USFL teams did at the gate, that even when you see 6,000, 7,000, that's, some of these USFL games are in the hundreds. And I'm not talking about, the games that had neutral site teams, whatever, the Stars playing in Michigan or whatever. So they're working hard, but they're understaffed too. Like the Jason Ganella, am I pronouncing his name correctly? All those guys, that team is understaffed. And so they had a small window because, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, there wasn't a guarantee that the government was going to approve it. When they did approve it, it was kind of like they had just a few months to get it up and running. I know they already had seeds kind of planted in St. Louis and DC, but people forget, like, there was a lot of uncertainty with the XFL right after their season ended with the Vegas situation where the Roughnecks were going to play. And then when the merger was announced, or the intent to merge was announced, then there was an extreme amount of uncertainty. Who's coming back? It got to the point where when eventually the cities were announced and the who's coming and all that, people were celebrating in St. Louis. Yay, Battlehawks are back. They were never gone to begin with, but it was at a point where the leagues didn't know whether or not they would be approved. And also they couldn't, I know they did deposits and all that, and they ended up refunding certain teams, Seattle, whatever. But they didn't really. So I think this offseason leading into the next, we'll see what the timeline in the calendar is. And the league has to help out their staff. The people that are involved in sales, they're trying. But in a perfect world, you'd have teams set up. You'd plant seeds, you'd have teams set up in each market pushing, and you would take the entire off season to start planting seeds for community events, everything else, to start selling tickets and promoting locally. So you have 6-7 months to sell tickets. You shouldn't have to wait 2 weeks before the season starts to start actually pumping out or promoting to get ticket sales. So hopefully the bridge from 24, the expectations were modest at best for attendance this year. And so there was a hope that the USFL teams will pick up. Maybe Birmingham will pick up. They've gotten to the point where they're good enough where they should be doing 20K a game. I can't quite figure that one out because for years I heard about how Birmingham's been burned by these leagues, but so many people said to me, Birmingham needs to have a team. Birmingham needs to have a team. Birmingham needs to have a team. Here you are. You have a team. They're really good. They're tremendous. They got NFL talent all over the place. You're going to see when the offseason comes, I'll have like 20 players signed on NFL teams. They're well coached. They're well run with Zachary Potter. So you would figure by now that Birmingham would have been a hit, a smashing hit. They have a good name, Stallions, cool brand, etc. And They're not. And they're in a position where the Stallions might actually make pro. We'll see what happens with the Chiefs. But Stallions might make pro football history, something that hasn't been done in a very long time. A pro football team winning 3 straight championships. Hasn't happened since the Elks in the late 70s, early 80s, and the Packers before the beginning of the Super Bowl era. So, anyhow, so the expectation levels were modest to begin with. I think pressure's on, though. Right now, I believe the league last year, the XFL last year, because the USFL didn't disclose their numbers, they were pretty bad. The XFL last year, I believe, sold over 600,000 tickets. I want to say 600 for 43 games, right? If you count the championship game, which was like 22,000 in San Antonio. I think the league right now is a little bit like 280,000, I believe. So at the halfway point, they're a little behind what they did last year, the XFL. So I think that'll help with St. Louis games. St. Louis is playing really well. Looks like we're possibly going to have 7 St. Louis home games. I guess they got a few left now. And then, of course, the playoff game and then the championship game. So that might help the overall attendance when the end of the season comes. But it's definitely a topic, and it's definitely a marker for fans to see whether or not the league is catching on. People who hate these leagues love my attendance tweets. Because they're like, aha, look how poorly they're doing. They really love the people who are CFL loyalists. They loved my attendance tweets. Makes me feel guilty for putting them out there, but I'm a reporter. That's what I do. I have people want to know. And then even when I put them out there, people think maybe they're fudged. Trust me, they would not. I'm just a messenger here, but they would not be happy to let people know that only 7,000 people showed up in Birmingham, that only 6,000. Those would not be. You'd want to fudge it a little bit better than that.
In terms of you're talking getting, we need to get people in these markets working, right? I know Michigan, they sent out, like they're doing a meet and greet here on Saturday, but it's all contingent on, okay, we're going to fly in, we're going to go to the thing, then we're going to go to the game, then we're going to fly out, right? Because we can't keep people in these markets overnight or do any of that stuff. At the end of the season, when they lay off or whatever, all these salespeople anyway, I just don't see them doing the year round. I mean, I know that I agree that that's what they need to do, but at the end of the season, a lot of these seasonal people, coaches, ticket staff, all that's going to go away. So I don't know how you build that off season at all, right? And it's such a small window, 10 weeks plus the playoffs, whatever. Like, I just don't know how you ever hope to build this. The only markets that, like you said, with DC and St. Louis that are, exceeding any expectations right now are the ones that have been around since 2018.
Right. And I think they're not going to do this, but you would hope they would. But you almost need team presidents in the markets. You need infrastructure there. You need to have headquarters there. And so that's money. That's spending money. So you need boots on the ground. And I think whether or not they're willing to do that. So it comes down to whether or not you're going to have boots on the ground, like marketing promotion teams in each individual city to promote the leagues. Or if you're not going to put the actual teams in their cities, to be there all season round, or it comes down to spending money on promotion and marketing dollars, radio ads, TV ads, advertisements locally, and then putting a budget towards that. If you're not going to put, because they're understaffed when it comes to ticketing and sales. So, and they don't do a good enough job. That's tough for me to say, but they don't do a good enough job promoting to begin with. Like, I would be beating people over the head trying to tell them that tickets are available and all that. They try, but I think I would go overboard. Just sell. I'm to the point where you'd be annoyed with me. But so anyhow, but I think it's a tough one because it's going to require them. I spoke to someone who worked in the other United Football League recently, and they said that they saw an increase once they started to put promotion and marketing in the individual markets. Like, they used to put people boots on the ground, and it wasn't by any means like great, but they saw an increase. So, the other UFL, which people have forgotten about, but not too long ago. But I think that's what they need to do. They're going to need to use their resources, and whether or not they want to do that, but you get what you put in. You're not, their whole thing is the crawl before you can walk strategy. And then get to walking and then get to the running part. And they're still doing a lot of crawling in a lot of respects. And at some point you're going to need a boost so you can start walking. And I think if you got to go out swinging, if they're satisfied with this and they're okay with low attendance numbers and modest ratings, and they don't want to see the games average 2 million viewers or games average 20K, if they're okay with this modest stuff, then all right. But if they actually want, I don't think they are, if they want to actually be a success, they're gonna have to put in more work, more promotion. They're gonna have to spend some money. They can strategically do it. Russ Brandon, that team, they got to come up with a strategy. Might as well, that's what's happened to the leagues of the past. They swung for the fences and struck out immediately, got into the red. So they're so scared of striking out. But at some point, you're going to get to the point where you go, all right, do we want this to last forever and be a success? And then we better take our swing. So I'm thinking, if they don't do it this coming off season going into 2025, then they're going to strike out eventually. So I'm thinking that this off season is going to be a key for them. We'll see how they allocate their resources, because I think they're going to need to step it up a little bit. They're going to have to take a couple of risks that maybe they've been trying to avoid for the last few years in this space.
It's just like lack of consistency, because and I think it was Andy and I were talking on one of the things, like, you have these 8 social media people, right? They're working, like Leah's on there doing this. Hey, come, I'm here in San Antonio. We're doing all this stuff. Like, why doesn't every team do that? Why doesn't Jay do that? Why doesn't the people that do I don't know who does the Roughnecks, social media, like, even if you don't want to spend the money, like, you don't have to, there's certain things, like, you already have people in place that you can do, right? And I don't know if it means flying the social people in early, let them run the table up on the Saturday ahead of the game for a Sunday. I mean, I like that we did the draft thing. I like that, but I don't know why there's not a permanent fixture in front of, the Rangers Stadium all the time. Hey, we're doing games here. We're doing games here. I mean, that is a huge conglomeration of sports, and like anyone that's been there, like, there's tons of stuff to do, and there's restaurants, and they're like, run a thing where you have a banner in Texas Live all the time. Like, I mean, there's just things you can do that I don't think, because people always say, like, well, you criticize, you don't want to, give any, like, there's things that they could be doing already that they're not. I think it's just little things like that.
Yeah, they definitely need to do that. To borrow like a wrestling term, like, you got to start acting like a little bit like an outlaw promotion. Like, like I know maybe they feel you're above it to handing out flyers.
I think they do. I think that yes.
Yeah, they think they're above it, but I think you need to go above and beyond. Another thing that they need to do, and I've been saying this for the longest time, it's fallen on deaf ears. They need to embrace all media, like, especially like people who are trying to cover you, like fantasy football, gambling. Just embrace all of them. These people are going to promote for you. Yeah. They're going to end up working for you, unpaid. So that's the thing. That's how do you sell tickets in the market locally? There's a lot of good people covering the league. I spoke with Greg Luca, who's in San Antonio. We've had some conversations. Maybe I can't get into too much of that, but he covers the Brahmas. He does very good work for them. They just don't do the traffic there. There isn't a lot of local interest there in San Antonio. I think you need to be proactive and reach out to media members in each market. I remember the XFL in 2020, they had carte blanche they gave to Rich Cimini, who covers the New York Jets for the New York Post. They went to media members, and Stephanie Rudnick and that team did a very good job. Humble yourself. Like, you're a new league. You're trying to, these media members, they'll promote the league for you. So you need to roll out the red carpet. And, and I would do that with everybody who wants to cover the league. Don't shun them, because they're promoting your league. They will promote your league. You'll be surprised if you start giving people access and information, how much they embrace your league even more and root for you to succeed. They'll openly work for you to succeed, for your players to get attention, for your coaches to get attention. If you expect them to come to you, it's just not, it's not, especially with these new leagues. It takes a while, in the early stages of any professional sports league, it takes time for like mainstream outlets and for a lot of outlets to start coming to your games and writing about you. And there isn't people clamoring right now to cover these leagues, not in the numbers that they need. So if you, in each individual market, target every media outlet that covers you, be transparent and give them information. Do it to fantasy community, do it to gambling. You got so many people out there established to run all these outlets that are trying so hard to get these, use another wrestling term, get these leagues over. And that's I think that is, if you're not going to put boots in the ground, infrastructure in individual markets, have the teams there year round, all that, you really need to put out the olive branch for people, even people who are ignoring your league. Contact them and see if they'll do a story. Like, just that's what the XFL in 2020 did effectively. They reached out. They humbled themselves. They reached out to every medium, whoever was willing to cover. They reached out to NFL teams. They reached out to scouts. They reached out to every community to try to get them to cover the league. And so to get, hey, come on, we'll take care of you. Hey, come on. And a first class operation from top to bottom. So they did a tremendous job. So I think you get what you put in. You're not going to get the numbers you want, the attention you want by just existing or being it. Not going to happen.
Well, and as someone that's worked in local news, like, I'll give you a lot of these sports departments would love, like, oh, hey, I have free extra content here to cover, right? Especially in some of these markets. I mean, are the Spurs? I don't even watch NBA, but like, I assume the Spurs are out of the. Right, they're not playing. Like, what is San Antonio talking about right now in sports? Right, like, what are they talking about? What is St. Louis? I mean, like, what are they talking about? They're certainly not talking about, football of any kind. But I just don't like. You need to do that. And then what was I going to say? Because also, like, it's not even like you got to send a crew out. Like, all this stuff is virtual right now, at least. Like, take advantage of being in the hub. Like, to me, and I'm not there. I imagine it's a little bit like summer camp, right? Like, we're all here. You're kind of just part of this all the time, right? And like the coaches, and when we had Heimbach on, he had to do it on a Sunday because they're running, like, but we're kind of existing in this whole sphere for the 12 weeks or whatever, right? And training camp and all that. So it's like, of any time that you can get players and coaches on, like, now is the time. It's not like, 5 years from now, I'm like, oh, well, I'm off on the weekend, I'm going out of town, or I'm like, what are you doing on a Tuesday after practice? Like, you're in the hub in Arlington. Like, get these players, get these coaches on. Like, that's what I don't get. It's not even like you got to send people out to do this. Pull it up on your phone, have them call it from the locker room. It's not like CFL does that. Hey, we'll have, I can't remember who it was. Like, he just sat in the locker room after practice for 10 minutes. Like, you could hear people walking around. It was cool, but it was like, that was a free thing that didn't cost any money. And like, here you go. That's free promotion out there that, 10 minutes is someone's time.
Right. And, like, the credit to the CFL, Lucas Barrett, shout out to all that group over there. They'll reach out. They reached out to Anthony Miller and myself to interview CFL Combine players and all that. And so set up interviews, and they reached out to us. Hey, would you like to interview these people? Would you like to interview these coaches? Would you like to interview these prospects? And so that was really cool. And they're appreciative of the coverage, and they extend the olive branch. It doesn't cost you anything to do that stuff, by the way. So it's a matter of hustling. Now, I understand they're understaffed, but I think they need to reassess their position, what they can do from a PR standpoint, what they can do from a media standpoint. In a lot of cases, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. I know this is like the 800th first impression, basically between the USFL and the XFL and all the reiterations. But I think that's a big factor. I think the more media members that cover the team, your attendance will go up. That's a trick. They promote your games by default in the local papers. I know papers are going by the wayside, but in online media, so it'll help more people come out to the games.
Well, and I think that because, and I think I talked about this with Greg Parks. There was that whole gambling podcast that the guy went on the rant about not being able to go, like, and I wouldn't have handled it that way, right? I mean, I think we can talk about that, but I think that the league is afraid of, like, we're going to send someone on a podcast and they're going to get burned, right? Because we saw what happened with, who was the guy that leaked the cities in the XFL, the DPP for Orlando, was it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. It's passing me at the moment, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Or something. Yeah, but so they're worried about that, right? And I understand that, but like, then you just blackbar that person and they're never able to do, I think that's what they're afraid of, right? Well, we don't have time to go through all these different people that want to talk, or we're like, we don't want to deal with how many gambling pockets. Like, they're afraid of that. Where just let them do it, and then if something doesn't work out, then you're like, I mean, what is the worst that happens at this point? Like, you know, I can't Hakeem Butler is
Yeah, it's like,
at the
no,
front
we're not
office.
going to ask for social security numbers. We're not
Yeah.
going to ask for passcodes or anything like that. There's no like secret information. It's so I
Or do what like Brian Stoll does and just like he'll just sit in the background and work on other stuff. And then you're just listening. And if anyone, I mean, if you don't, you can be on the calls with a lot of these. I mean, I have that with the CFL people sometimes that they want, or like, when they had on when Heimbach was on, Bianca with the Renegades was on there. I mean, that's fine. But then just keep that on in the background. If anyone's doing it, you can call in, and I could even have on StreamYard people sit in the background and listen and be able to say, hey, don't talk about like, but at this point, we're not expanding cities right now. Like there's no like secret sauce you're hiding at this point. Like we're week 5, week 6 of the UFL season. Like we're just trying to kind of talk about football here. No one's like starving and talking about living conditions, like whatever the league that Sam's, like
oh
we don't have players living in hovels at this point. Like everyone I think is being taken care of pretty well.
yeah. Thank goodness for that. We don't have the craziness that we're seeing, unfortunately, in the Arena Football League. Talk about dropping the bag, dropping the ball. Anyhow, that's a conversation for another time. But unfortunately, with a lot of these leagues, you see that financial issues, everything else, they're unable to. They talk a good game, but they're unable to back it up.
Are you, and then we'll talk football here. Yeah, we've done a lot of attendance and TV stuff, but are you surprised with the damage that the USFL markets did, and especially with Birmingham season 1 to 2, right? Them not, and then with these USFL markets with the Memphis and the Michigan, like it. I never would have thought that the hub and all of that would have like hurt Birmingham. It seems like as much as it has, where they cannot get it. I mean, and I know it's still a high watermark compared to like Houston, but they can't get anyone to that stadium.
I don't know what's going on with that general area, because at least, we saw Fox release the numbers. At least Birmingham locally is doing well ratings wise, right? They were one of the top regional markets that's been watching the league. And I know part of that is like Birmingham was the first game of the season. They've been in primetime slots, etc. So, of course, their numbers are going to be a little bit better than some of the other teams, but it hasn't translated, obviously, to the box office. I'm not, there's a reason why only 3 USFL teams survived this merger. I know the Gamblers are part of it, but not the Gamblers brand. The Gamblers never played in Houston. So they, the only home stadium teams, basically, Birmingham, Michigan. I'm not, the numbers. Michigan, I always thought the Panthers were an awesome brand from the original USFL, but I was surprised they chose Michigan and Ford Field. That was a unique and curious move. And so, as far as Birmingham goes, they've been disappointed from day one, and they said it publicly in terms they don't understand why they haven't taken off there. So people don't like to hear it. The people who back the Stallions, God bless you. I'm glad you do. I wish there were more people like you, because it just really, they need to do better. Like everyone knows, like we kind of like you grade them on a curve. Like if Michigan or Memphis tomorrow does 12,000 a game, we go, whoa, nice. If Birmingham does 12,000, go, oh boy, come on, guys.
And people don't understand that too. I mean, yes, you have to grade these on a curve. They're not all equal franchises right now.
Yeah, and like St. Louis, for example, we sit there. There's a lot of people. I get it. They did 31,000 in the last game, and I'm like, oh man, I wish they could have done better. And well, you forget, hey, 31,000 is pretty freaking awesome, right?
That's 5 Memphis.
That's not bad. 31K is pretty good, but they've set a bar now, right? So you got Anthony Becht on social media, Torrey Holt, like they're trying to get the St. Louis fans to show up this weekend for the Houston game. I'm not that they don't show up. I'm not saying that. But they want them to like build up that number, get in that 35, 36, 37, 38, maybe past 40 range, right? But there's different curves here. Birmingham is like one of those, to me, one of the biggest disappointments. I knew the numbers last year, right? Like I said, there were some games in the hundreds. I knew the numbers, no matter how many spatulas you gave out. Michigan and Memphis, I kind of expected this. When I saw the 6,000-7,000 stuff, I was like, yeah, all right. I wish it was better, but I didn't expect a great leap from 483 to like 20,000 in a year. So I'm sorry, but to me, Arlington, and I understand they're 0-5 now, right? So they're winless. There's not a lot of reason to go there. To me, Arlington, it's not quite the Birmingham situation, but you would figure, since it's the league's hub, that they would do much better locally there of promoting and marketing and being able to sell tickets and get the word out. And to me, the Renegades have been a disappointment in the league. Their last game wasn't bad, attendance wise, it was okay, But I think they should do so much better. Now I think, it's unfortunate they're on 5, so I don't know how you're going to convince so many people to come out to those games. I hear you. But I think Arlington's been one of the disappointments in the league. San Antonio, they drew over 20,000 fans in their home opener last year. Unfortunately, in the local media, they had stories coming out that employees were getting fired, and people were expecting so it didn't really help matters. And then they were really bad, the Brahmas. But the Brahmas are a really good team this year. They're exciting. They're fun to watch. So you'd hope that those numbers will go up as the season goes along. Maybe they might, but it's not the smash hit that it was in the AAF 5 years ago now. And so there's definitely you grade these teams differently. And Birmingham to me is one of the teams that you hope as the season goes along that those numbers start to creep up and they start to do better and better, that they have a home playoff game that has a 23K or 24K. They should do that. Because you got to wonder about that lease. You can't lose that Birmingham brand, but I believe that lease expires after this year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, in terms of the difference, and I was at, the USFL kickoff in 2022, that felt like a hub. There was branding around there. They had, kind of like signage, and they had the USFL. Like it felt like that was the home of that. And then the players were staying like literally right across the street. So that kind of helped all that stuff. There is no and people talk like, oh, the XFL or the UFL hub in Arlington, like that doesn't exist. Like it's not the same. It doesn't feel the same. You would not know it exists. You can sit at Texas Live across the street and have barbecue and not realize that this is there at all. Like it's. I understand the comparison there, but like people, unless you've been to both of them, like it's very different. But it is. You would think that it would draw better, but it's remarkable how it does not. How inexistent it is there.
Yeah, and all those teams are there locally in Texas. You would hope, because Texas is such a great football place, that by now they even adopted the name Arlington rather than calling themselves Dallas, to try to ingratiate themselves with the Arlington area location. So anyhow, but yeah, some of these teams and cities have underwhelmed, and that's why everyone's always calling for relocations and all that, but we'll see.
Two more things, and then I want to talk the Brahmas and stuff here with the quarterback. I know we're not surprised that Houston is not succeeding this season, with the rebrand and all that stuff. But I don't know. To me, that's like what a swing and a miss. Like and I understand the politics were involved in that merger, and you got to keep 4-4 and all of that. But that killed that franchise. I don't see anybody in the comments on our videos and. Our team stinks now, and they give us all this stuff, and they expect us to come out. Do they reverse course on that? I don't think you can, but same with the kickoff here and changing that whatever before the season. But this to me was a huge swing and a miss that I think has egg on their face.
Yeah, in hindsight, they should have just stuck with the Gamblers. If they were going to keep the Gamblers players, Gamblers coach, best Gamblers players from last season, they should have just said, hey, Gamblers have their own stadium. They're going to be playing in Rice. Come on out. We don't know how we're going to do. Come on out. It would have been a different feel, right? Even if they got 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, be like, hey, this is their first time playing at home, and they're trying to build their brand. This is their first time actually being there. Once you knew Wade Phillips was out in Houston and you weren't keeping the Roughnecks players, I think at that point they should have stuck with the Gamblers. Just done the 4-4. Don't create this weird confusion, because that's what happened. Basically, it's like you're not really rooting for the Roughnecks. You're, that you're already changing from TDECU to Rice. You don't have Wade Phillips. It's not the same team. It'd be like if the Jets all of a sudden. All their players, Sauce Gardner, all their players go and they move on somewhere else, the entire roster, and now they're the Cleveland Browns, whatever. You're gonna be a lot of Jets fans going, "What the hell?" And they're not playing in the same stadium, and so it created a lot of confusion. So in hindsight, they probably should have just stuck with the Gamblers. And if you're gonna keep the Gamblers staff, the Gamblers players, just keep the brand. Because these are not the real Roughnecks. Now, maybe over time they'll grow into it, but it was awkward to begin with from Jump Street. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too. It was a poor choice, poor decision. And I would have stuck with the Gamblers brand. It would be a different optic right now if the Gamblers If the gamblers are finally playing at home and they're only doing 7K, but they're not winning games, so maybe they can build it up over time once they start winning and all that. But it feels like they failed the Roughnecks brand, which wasn't like the hottest of things last year. They were pretty good. They made the playoffs, but it was much hotter than, so anyhow. But it's just the way it went.
Well, yeah, because you lost the Roughneck. I wouldn't say you lost all, but you lost a non-zero, I would say a larger portion of the Roughnecks fans. And then it wasn't like there was this huge Houston, gamblers contingent there ready to embrace it. I mean, I know that there's some go-kart driving or whoever, I don't know what, like, fans of this team, but it wasn't. It was the least of both, because you lost and then you weren't it's like you leaving your wife for the neighbor that's already not interested in you at all. Like, I don't, it wasn't a very good situation.
No, not at all.
Final thought here. We get a lot of people on here, they got to relocate. What is your thoughts on that here as we get and you kind of see some of this? Because I don't know if we add teams, I don't know if we relocate after the season, but what do you think?
Oof. Honestly, I think you have to consider it. You have to. There's no way you can't consider it. Once you make that move, though, that's it. Like, once you relocate a team, because the problem with these leagues is it's hard to get faith. Like, if you go into a new market, you have to choose the right one too. So it's tough. Once you send the message that a league is shifting their teams and relocating teams, and there's no stability there, then there's no reason for the new markets to believe that you're going to stay there, and it creates a perception that this league's going to go away quick. Because they already failed. They're just grasping at straws, trying to find a solution. You really need to think it through before you make that kind of decision. You also could look at the TV numbers at the end of the year, regional markets, all that. See how the market is doing in terms of. It's just funny. Like, every year, I saw the Fox release their top 10 markets, and I keep seeing Tulsa and Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. They keep sprouting up in these things, and I'm not advocating a Tulsa team, but they're watching. So, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of the Bob Stoops aspect with the Oklahoma aspect. I don't know, but they're watching. I know Ohio's, if they actually had teams, but I think they need to assess it. A lot of this comes down to business decisions. It comes down to locking down venues and what the rental costs are going to be, all that. And so I think they need to consider it. But once you do it, once you pull that lever, press that button, that's it. That's it. You cannot. I saw that with the original USFL. They were relocating every 5 seconds. The Renegades played in like 70 different cities. They were trading franchises. They were doing all that stuff. It created tremendous instability, and it made fan bases think, well, this league's not going to be around for much longer. And why would you invest in the team that just abandoned? So, like, you assume it's just going to move it anyway. Once ticket sales are bad, we got to move this too. So, you got to plant your seed and then just put whatever your resources into it to try to make it work. I'm not a huge fan, unless there's a few, like, there's a couple of, like, it's San Diego and a few places like that you can find. I'm not a huge, because there are markets that will embrace this league, but you have to select the right ones, and then once you're there, you're there. So that's it. We'll see. I think, like, Memphis, as crazy as it sounds, I think, now watch, this will age poorly, but I think Memphis I think you could make that work. I know that sounds crazy. I'm definitely on the outside on this one. I think you could make that work. I think you obviously have to have a good team, but I also think you need to put in money in promotion and marketing. I think that's a market that it could work.
Because to me, like, adding a Canton team or relocating, or the Nashville Tuners or Tulsa, like, I would do anything in my power to get a team on the West Coast of any kind. And I don't say it's got to be, like, I don't care if it's Seattle or Portland or Sacramento or Oakland. Or even like Denver would feel better. Just something that's just not in this mishmash of the southeastern part of the United States. That, to me, and when they show the map and you're like, there's just so much of the country that you're, ignoring here. And that's why I just, I know Andy wants San Diego, but, jump in on the Oakland if I know the baseball thing and it's not quite the same, but, like, it's too much that they're missing out on. I would do anything to get a team anywhere remotely near the West Coast.
Right. And we like I talk about so many times the floor and the ceiling. One of the reasons that these leagues have limited ceilings in terms of viewership is because it's only 8 markets, right? But you got to have, if you want to maximize your viewership, it's not like the NFL where every market watches the games, right? Watches the Arizona Cincinnati
Yeah.
game. So if you want to maximize your ratings, you have to be in the right markets that want these leagues to exist there. So if you're going to have only 8 teams or 10 teams or what have you, that's a big thing with television and viewership too, is the market share. Not having a New York or New Jersey team is a factor. Not having a team in the West Coast is a factor. You want to be in the biggest television markets. Well, even because if you're doing only, let's just say, right? Because I know people like to rag on the New York Guardians, but they you would kill right now for an average attendance of 15K for these teams. By the way, the Guardians had a close to 30,000 fans of their 2 games in the dead of winter. But even if you have only 10,000 fans at a New York game, that TV rating is going to be higher because you have that market watching the New York, New Jersey market. Same thing on the West Coast. So they've limited themselves by not having a West Coast presence, by not having another Northeast team, I think. So they've limited. So if we're up to me, it's not my money again. That they're not on the West Coast because they're trying to save money, but they're not in the Northeast because you have to figure out that whole venue situation and all that costs money. But if it were me, if you're trying to get bigger and better and trying to get higher ratings, I would definitely consider a West Coast presence and a New York presence, as far as I'm concerned, to make this league have a higher ceiling. You'll have more viewers. The highest rated non-NFL games, the New York Guardians game, by the way. That's the highest rated. I just got to say it. It was on Fox Sunday afternoon. It wasn't the opening game of the season. Like it actually had higher ratings than the opener for the XFL in 2020. So, and that was on Fox on a Sunday afternoon. So, that market helps. That's one of the biggest markets. So right now, the XFL, the USFL, the UFL, they don't have a lot of big TV markets as far as they're going. They need to have a little wider reach. So if they ever get to the expansion or relocation business, I think they need to consider not only hitting areas that are watching these games. The regional markets will tell you which areas have an interest, an appetite for this. If you do the data from the AAF until now, you'll see there's a trend. There are certain markets that always watch, even when they don't have teams. That should tell you something. Use that info. And so if we're going to relocate, we got to have a West Coast presence, I think. And I know a lot of people are against it. There's like a New York bias or whatever. But I think it's important. Well, whatever you do, Generals, Guardians, whoever it is, I think eventually if this league, I will know this league has made it when they have a New York or New Jersey team. And that's my opinion. I will know if they get to that point where they actually have a team there. It's just going to help the overall. It helps the overall league too to have a New York team in the league itself, because you need somebody to hate that you want to beat. So it's really like a big factor for these leagues as far as ratings and attention goes and driving interest. So anyhow, we'll see if they can get to that.
And I know we've talked about this, and I think Greg Parks was going to write the article as well for UFL board, but the markets that they have right now make no sense at all. If you asked, 100 people on the street, what 8 markets do you think that, this new football league is in? Well, there's going to be 3 in Texas, and they're going to have Michigan. They're going to it just doesn't. And I know that how we've gotten to this point, but yeah, there needs to be at some point, there needs to not just be we have the protectives at least in, for Birmingham or whatever. At some point, there needs to be some thought process versus just well, it's cheaper to play there than it is to play somewhere else. I mean, the 3 Houston teams, and I know, or the 3 Texas teams, I know we've gone about that, but, it makes no logical sense why these are the 8 markets and you're cutting out, 2/3 of the country.
Yeah, and it's like a crapshoot sometimes with these things, because a lot of people who are casual UFL fans will say, why are they in these NFL markets? And they got a point, right? For sure. But you would hope with the UFL that Birmingham and San Antonio, which are non-NFL markets, would actually do better than they have. So sometimes there is an argument for we got the NFL, let's go to all non-NFL cities. But sometimes some of the non-NFL cities don't hit the way you think they will. In the
Because there's a reason. Sorry, because there's a reason the NFL teams aren't there. Some of the time, there's a reason why they don't. The NFL isn't in some of these.
It's tough, and in St. Louis has been great, awesome. They deserve that. That's an awesome sports city, right? And because the NFL spurned them, and you treated them the way they did, that's given them ammunition to embrace this league even more. Battlehawks, as it turns out, is kind of a fun brand and all that. The whole they've embraced it. It's cool, right? Anthony Beck is awesome. All that. There's a lot of things to love about the Battlehawks brand and who's behind it, all that. But it's not a guarantee that if you just choose. Orlando wasn't knocking it out of the park last year with the Guardians. I know that team was awful. San Antonio hasn't been a killer. They should be doing better. I love San Antonio personally. I thought it was a very cool choice when the XFL said they were going to go there. It just hasn't been a disaster, but it hasn't lived up to obviously what we got in the AF. And a lot of people expect it. Like, people talk about San Antonio legitimately as a potential NFL. But I tell you what, when you see the attendance for the Brahmas, you wonder. I know the NFL brand is like so untouchable right now that if you put it anywhere, it's going to do okay. But I do think that they need to start doing market research on what markets are actually interested in their league. And I'm not saying they should all of a sudden go to New Mexico and Tulsa and all that. But hey, like Columbus, Ohio, that's a great football state. So they have a nice stadium option there in Columbus. Worth looking into.
Last question here. We'll get you out. I appreciate you taking the time here during the day. What is it? Speaking of the Brahmas here, quarterback situation, what's going on with this? I know we have the signing. I was traveling yesterday, and I don't even really know all about this gentleman and everything, but what's going on with that? And I think Tom Flacco got waived, right? I saw the transaction. So just kind of catch up on that.
Yeah, so it's out there now. So last week I was told that the Brahmas were interested in signing Jaden Delora, right? He's has off-field issues, a pretty serious one involving rape. So it's a delicate situation here. Not a great from a PR aspect. Him and a teammate, supposedly, or a high school friend or whatever, coerced or forced a teenager to have sex with them. And so that was found out by Texas State. And then he was, kicked off the team. He's a very talented player. I could see why Mark Lillybridge and he has experience in the run and shoot. He has success there in Arizona. So I could see why they'd be interested in him. But I was told last week, to not talk about it yet because they're still working on it. So it's out now. So I guess the team will release that information on Thursday. We'll officially announce the signing. Could be a dicey situation. Talented player. Delora would come in right now, would be quarterback 3, would be inactive. We're halfway through the season, so there's a question of whether or not he'll get on the field and even play, right? You would assume. I mean, Darmody wasn't that great last week, but maybe down the road they might make a change. But I think it would take time for Delora to step in and be the starter there. And we're getting towards the end of the season, so it's an interesting signing from a talent perspective. I totally see it. From a PR aspect, this isn't a Chad Kelly situation. Chad Kelly's being accused of basically harassing an employee there in Toronto, but he's not I'm not trying to.
Yeah, but there's different levels here.
Yeah, there's different level, So so I hear you. So this is kind of a different situation altogether. So it's a tough one there. I see why they would be interested in talent wise. If the league had more attention nationally, there would be a lot of people that would be very upset that they're entertaining signing someone like this.
Well, no, I mean, it's the pros and cons of that. Yeah, it's just weird to think of any PR that if he's even going to hit the field or not. So just kind of odd that way. But Mike, I appreciate it here. Almost an hour here. I know busy and dealing with family things and everything else. So I really appreciate it. Like I said, like and subscribe. Get us over the 3,500. I was trying to get Tim Capper on this week to talk arena football. It's his birthday as we record this. So happy birthday, Tim, if you've made it this far. But maybe we'll get Tim on next week because I want to do a little bit of that. We're not full on arena league football, but arena football league. But, there's a lot going on there. And then obviously with the CFL stuff. Mike, anything else from you before we get out?
No, there's some great things going on in indoor football. I'm so wrapped up in pro football, obviously, but you got TJ Edwards, the Fighters, all these cool teams out there in the IFL, and it's a shame with the AFL. I was a fan of the Arena Football League during the NBC kind of resurgence, that kind of era, and so it's unfortunate to see how things have gone there. You want as many of these leagues, even if it's indoor, which is not my bag of tea, but you want as many of these leagues to exist and thrive and do well. And so it's kind of the story. By the way, I would hope that people out there would subscribe. You need what, 50 subscribers right now, Reed?
Like
Is that where
nothing.
we're
I
at?
mean, it's like 1/1000th of the Battlehawks to or
Okay,
whatever the number is.
I know there's like a lot of negativity, and sometimes like I know it's easier to get likes and fan service and subscribers if you preach to the choir, if you play fan service. So sometimes Reed has some guests here that are pretty harsh, and they like have some pretty strong opinions and be negative. A lot of these people that come on here, I don't always agree with their opinions. I like last week's show. I won't get into all that. But it's this stuff. These are people that are actually passionate and care about the league and want to see it succeed. So I think like that hopefully that doesn't turn people off. I hate to be doom and gloom with these leagues because I'm such a huge fan of them. So
Yep.
so anyway, Reed, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Mike. We'll see everyone next week. Like I said, stay tuned. Should be another good one, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.